Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I am, as she mentioned, the assistant principal at St. Matthew's Elementary, and I am actually lucky enough to be in school right now where they are replacing our windows, which is why I have headphones on. So I hope that you can hear me and not construction. There shouldn't be any right now. But again, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad Miss Susan Price is with me. Before I was the assistant principal at St. Matthew's back in October, I just took this job. And before that, I was in the Office of Teaching and Learning with Susan and the rest of the teaching and learning team. And so that's really why I'm here today, to talk about some of the work we did collaboratively to create and refine the JCPS assessment landscape. So really, we just want to talk about it. It's a resource. It's a tool for you as you plan in these difficult circumstances this year. And we want to also talk about kind of implications for the NTI environment. So we hope today that you can just reflect on the purpose of different assessment types that really are outlined in this tool for you. Thinking about, as a classroom teacher, what data points should be used for what purpose. Thinking as a school leader, what assessments should drive our systemic changes, et cetera. And then we also want to just give you some thoughts to consider, implications, to just make sure you have a balanced assessment approach, both in your classroom and school. So again, the purpose of this assessment landscape that the district has created is to really define the purpose of different assessments, promote assessment literacy, and think about how these assessments should be used when triangulating data to make instructional decisions, both as a teacher, as a leader, and as a school community. So assessment, I want to just start with this quote by Vagel. Assessment is an intentional process of gathering information, both formal and informal, to understand a student's learning and performance in order to facilitate and communicate achievement and levels of proficiency. And so it's really important that we consider multiple forms of assessment at the school level. And so what this is a screenshot from JCPS's website, and then you all have this link right here, and we're going to just dive right in and take a look at what this looks like. If I can get it. All right. So this is public for everyone, and this will take you to the JCPS Curriculum Design and Learning Innovation, which you're probably familiar with. That's where you find the curriculum frameworks, instructional frameworks, and then we have this assessment landscape piece. So this is an interactive graphic, and it is there is a brief explanation on the assessment framework that you will be able to access. And I really like this part right here because it just defines assessment literacy. And as educational professionals, it's really a responsibility that we know when we are giving an assessment to kids, whether that's a grade or a check or a conversation, we know that that is going to change the learning outcome for them. And so this is available to you. There are some great resources on assessment literacy, on creating assessment, and a Rick Stickens video. So you will hopefully, if you're interested and want to kind of peruse these resources, you can. My previous position was with academic multi-tiered system of support. And so this is really important as schools think about tiered instruction for kids. And we'll get into sort of our universal screeners, which is MAP. And so how to make those decisions to make sure kids are getting what they need. Susan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're good. You're doing a great job, Melissa. Thank you.
Of course. So let's dive into the 4 components of the assessment landscape. I'm actually going to start with Universal Screener. So obviously things are a little different this year. So context matters, but we're going to take this as it is in best practice and what was created in the assessment landscape. But really what a universal screener does is it's given to all students and it identifies their current performance on that day. So the Kentucky Department of Education defines universal screening as a process through which all students and their educational performance are examined so that they can have equal opportunity. And so we think of those in JCPS as Brigance, as MAP, and just ensuring students are receiving that academic support as soon as possible. So that's where your MTSS committees get together, your ILTs, and really looking at that moment in time data, that dipstick, and always really their scheduled assessments. So we know MAP is given 3 times a year. It's really important to have a specific window of time in between so that we can accurately assess the student's growth over time.
Kathleen, I will jump in there with MAP. So this year in the fall, we've changed the fall window and we're actually just doing remote testing for grades 3 through 8. And then we do have some high schools who have opted to use the MAP assessment in the fall. So what I will do is we have a MAP implementation guide. And so we have updated our 2020 MAP implementation guide. We did that this summer, but we also just added an appendix to that has information about remote testing, as well as this afternoon, we will have a session with Holly Sears, and she's going to talk about remote testing for teachers. So I'll send the link to Kathleen for the MAP implementation guide, and she can link it directly into this presentation so that everyone has that information.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan. Okay, let's move to formative assessment. And so I really like the way this is broken down in the assessment landscape. We kind of think about, we have 2, I'm not going to say they're 2 different types, but 2 breakdowns of formative assessment. So this top is, we think of formative assessment as learning. There's probably teachers watching this right now. I hope these are the actions you do probably without even identifying them. They're when you walk, prior to NTI, when you walk over to a student and you ask them a question. They are when you show students an image before getting into the content and saying, what do you wonder about this? It's really giving you information in the moment to make instructional changes. So this is huge, huge, huge. And we have to think and consider how we as classroom teachers are really going to implement this, are going to formatively assess our students in the virtual environment. And so I will get a little bit more into that, just give you some thoughts at the end of the presentation on how important that is. But as you can see, every piece of the assessment landscape gives you a definition with a source cited, the purpose. So we know this is to monitor student learning and provide ongoing feedback to improve student learning. And really how you as an educator should use it. Because if we're not using it, then really it's not going to matter. We need to make adjustments in what we're doing when we get that feedback from our students. So here are a few examples. There could be a lot more. And we have some really, Dylan Willem is somebody that knows a whole lot about formative assessment. I mean, he is the expert in the field of formative assessment. And he has some basic strategies that really should guide your beliefs about formative, or could guide your beliefs about formative assessments, but really always putting students in the driver's seat of their learning. And so we have some great resources here that I'd really encourage you to look at, maybe with your PLC, your data team, your peers. And then common formative assessments are something that people are probably familiar with. That word common, it's more of a formalized assessment. So it's that piece that you think of when you create it with a peer, collaboratively with a PLC, part of the PLC framework in JCPS. So you create these assessments with grade level peers based on a standard or a set of standards. So they really answer the critical question of how do we know our students are learning? So the purpose is defined right here. Again, they give us, the assessment data gives us information on what we as educators need to do to respond. And again, here is the PLC framework and where that is tied to that piece and this piece. And so these happen within or between an instructional unit, and teachers administer those common formative assessments to monitor the progress towards grade level expectations. And so these PLCs may analyze the student work collaboratively and then, of course, respond. So here are some examples here. Team develops success criteria. It might be an assessment using a resource, a vetted resource, but they're always tightly aligned to grade level standards. Susan, do you want to add anything about the two pieces of formative assessment?
No, just how with the 5 essentials for JCPS, the student assignment protocols will be really like key in, like we're designing the assignments, then we're formatively assessing them, but also using that quality work protocol as part of formatively assessing that student work against the grade level standards.
Perfect. Okay, we go to summative assessment. So the purpose of summative assessment are to really evaluate student learning, knowledge, proficiency of an instructional period in time, a unit, a course, or a program. And so teachers really use these assessments learning how to show evidence of student proficiency. And then they also are sometimes used to evaluate the effectiveness of the program, of the curriculum. So is this literacy curriculum serving our student population correctly? Like how is our implementation of this program? But also, and it really shows us where our students are in terms of proficiency. So these end of unit tests, these final projects, these portfolios, these presentations, end of term or end of year tests, midterms, finals, these are all classified under summative assessment. And finally, and I almost wonder if I should have started with this one, because demonstrations of learning can really be embedded in all these pieces. And so we don't even want you to think of it as, oh, and then there's demonstrations of learning. But demonstrations of learning really apply a deep understanding of academic content to novel problems and situations. So these develop a range of competencies, people skills, self-management, success skills, accessing content, and the application of all of those. And so really the purpose of these is to give students an authentic way to share and reflect their learning, which is going to be so important for us to be intentional about in the NTI 2.0 environment. So we really need, again, right here, how can a teacher use it? Really, they can use it as a summative assessment, a classroom formative assessment, formative assessment. Really, this piece fits within the entire framework. And when a student does show us through a demonstration of learning, we really know they're able to transfer these concepts to just real world scenarios, a variety of contexts, which is where true mastery happens. And deeper learning is really that term that describes a set of student educational outcomes.
Melissa, if you could just stay on that page and scroll up for just a moment.
Sure.
I just want to go back to compliment your team on the way that the assessment landscape is designed, because I think it's going to be so important for all of us as reminders that not only the different types of assessments, but how you all have set it up with its purpose, how a teacher should use it, and examples. Especially even for new teachers, this is just great for really understanding it, how it's used. And so I just encourage all teachers and principals who are out there to take a look at this with your teachers. And it is also one of the essential 5.
So again, this resource is located right on the JCPS Curriculum Design and Learning Innovation page. And there's a lot of good texts and resources embed. So one thing I just wanted to end with, and this is something that really helped me as a teacher and a leader think about assessment. And this graphic is from this book called, not that book, I've got too many books on my desk, Susan Brookhart, who does a lot of talk about assessment literacy and how to make decisions with different kinds of data. So if we look at this graphic, this is, the components of an assessment landscape. We've addressed these pieces in our assessment landscape. Accountability, we think of as K-prep, obviously, grading, classroom formative assessment, that formative piece. And then we would call this summative assessments. But really what Brookhart argues as a classroom teacher to really consider and zoom in to formative assessment. So while these pieces are so important and have a place in a balanced assessment system, our assessment landscape, I think the audience today is probably a lot of classroom teachers. And so we would really encourage you to just consider formative assessment throughout this time. Have good conversations with your peers about what that looks like to you, how to get students engaged in this virtual environment so that you know where they are. And these pieces are framed out separately from that, and the district is supporting you in all these pieces. So again, formative assessment, Black and Willem really explain that these classrooms with this formative assessment as learning, these moments when you're talking to kids, you know right where they are. Studies have indicated that it's comparable to one-on-one tutoring in its effectiveness. And so as a classroom teacher, I would just challenge you to consider that piece. And again, as we mentioned in the assessment landscape, this piece, formative assessment, can be demonstrations of learning. It can be paper and pencil. It can be class discussion. It can be a lot of different pieces. So educators, we really need to stop thinking about assessment as an accountability tool and start thinking it as a teaching tool. And we hope that the JCPS assessment landscape really allows and encourages you to do that. And the district is really behind this and is going to support the implementation. And so with that, Susan, I'd love to open up conversation or anything you'd like to add or anything in the chat box.
We have a few questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
Again, excuse my voice. Let's see here. One person asked how they find this, and I linked up in the chat Curriculum Design and Learning website. So Right. That is one way.
Kathleen, another way is the teacher backpack. It's located in the assessment portion of the teacher backpack.
And I can pull that up.
And how do we get to that teacher backpack, Susan? I think I forgot.
jcps.me/teacher
BP.
Click first grade. Just go over to the first grade
assessment right here, guys. And you know what? That map implementation guide is right there.
It's there. The map implementation guide is there. Direct link to the assessment landscape page. I mean, it's everything you need.
Everything you need. And you can click this star right. If I'm a first grade teacher, I'm going to bookmark this so that I can go right to it.
Yep. So that is the teacher backpack. Again, jcps.me/teacher BP. And I put that in the chat. And then one other question. I know how to assess normally, but our big question is, what does this look like during NTI?
Great question, Mary. Great question. So, as Susan stated, the district is going to support you with some of these pieces. We're going to implement the universal screener of MAP 3 through 8. I would just, what we're encouraging our teachers to do at St. Matthew's, we are giving them a ton of time to talk to their grade level peers on engagement strategies, so that formative assessment as learning, really thinking about pieces like that the digital learning channel is showcasing. So using, oh my goodness, what's the whiteboard, Kathleen?
Jamboard.
I mean, all these strategies can allow you to formatively assess your kids. You can assess them in the chat box. But I would also say that for our K to 5, I know, and Susan, you can speak more to this, we're going to have some really good guided reading resources coming, correct? And I know that there's information on implementing sort of assessment that way. Do you want to speak more to that, Susan?
Yes, and there's in the teacher backpack, there's an NTI resource for guided reading. And so those resources are there. So, and yesterday, the literacy team had professional learning on, and those are all linked as well into the digital learning channel. But they were actually showing how to do running records, just to really formatively assess through guided reading. So that resource is there. And also, I saw in the Summer Backpack League this summer, there were students who were demonstrating their learning. So they were one-on-one, or they had a peer group. I saw a little boy who was actually playing his violin for the teacher as a demonstration of learning. So I think there are a lot of creative ways that students can really, live demonstrate their learning. So I would just encourage that. We also had virtual defenses in the spring, so we will continue with those. So there are a lot of creative and different ways that students can, demonstrate their learning, and we can formatively and summatively assess during NTI.
Great information, ladies. Let's see if there's anything else I can ask.
Kathleen, I just saw a question. I'm monitoring the chat on another computer. So is MAP our primary universal screener for math? Yes, MAP is our primary universal screener for reading and math.
Good question.
And Kathleen, could you link from the teacher backpack the MAP implementation guide into this presentation?
Yes, Susan, I would love to.
I knew you would.
Do I have to do that right this second, or may I wait?
No.
Thank you. Okay, I will do that. I'm writing myself a note.
And we can here. I'm going to add this hyperlink to our presentation. So I will.
Thank you, Melissa.
No problem. So I'll just put it where would make sense.
And I also put the link to CDLI's website as well. But if you go to the teacher backpack, you're going to have access to all of these things. So
I'm going to just link it right here, the implementation guide.
Perfect. And if you're looking for that schedule, if you're just now joining us, I have linked it in the chat, and I will do it right now again for you. Here we go.
This is what the implementation guide looks like, just so.
Yep.
Has some great questions for consideration for teachers and leaders.
We have another question. I think it's Cliftina Parks said, when will primary use a universal screener?
Primary K through 3 will use MAP assessment in the winter. Thank you, Melissa.
Of course. Thank you.
Two brilliant women here with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
very much. And you guys have a great day.